Sikha, the Rabbi said to people who were trying to support yeshivas. He said it in his room in 1958, Tafshin Chai. Let's see how it goes. He says, every year, when it comes Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and we start a new year, even the previous year, we were involved in all types of good things. We go and get involved in our new things with a new chayas. We daven with a new chayas. We dance in Simchas Torah with a chayas, etc. Like everything begins again. And so too it is regarding the avoda in the yeshivas. That as the new year comes, there needs to be a avoda with greater chayas and greater simcha. And Hashem will help that it will be successful. My father-in-law one time, or he actually many times, spoke about the connection of Jews with the Torah. So that Chalukas HaTorah l'Sedarim Nifrados, that the division of the Torah into different parshas, different Sedarim, the meaning of it is Shemash Sidra Shekorim B'chol Shavua Yechol Nikach Horos Ketzad Lisnahag B'yachas HaMa'oros Shemisrachshim B'meshach HaShavua. Interesting. He says that from the parshas, the reason why the Torah is divided into parshas is so we can take a lesson, which is that you can take a lesson from the events that happen in the world based on the parsha that you're living in that year, at that time.
Living with the times.
So we're a Lech Lecha, Trump. It is an interesting thing, huh? So he says, what's our parsha all about? It's the parsha about the birth of Yishmael and Yitzchak. Anashim makavim shebeinehem yamshichu es inyanehem. People basically hope that their children will carry on their ways. And the Torah tells us here in this parsha that Hashem gave Avram 2 children. Oh, there's the man.
How are you?
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Just this morning. What is going
Come on in. Oh, you got me sitting down. All right, we can play this game.
You're stronger than me. I know that.
I'm not so sure.
We did that.
You're an army man there. Let's not forget. Anyway, so they want that their children should continue in their ways. So Hashem gave Abraham 2 children. First Yishmael and then Yitzchak. At the time that Avram was promised that he would be having Yitzchak, he already had Yishmael. And Hashem said to Abraham, the other way around. Abraham said to Hashem, Lu Yishmael yichel lefanecha. Right? Right when he was told about Yitzchak being born, his first line was, please let Yishmael live before you. In other words, he had something in his deep in his soul for Yishmael. Abraham was good to go even if Yitzchak was not born. And as far as Abraham was concerned, he was blessed with a son already. He was happy. And but he said,
But at that point, Hashem had made the covenant that his descendants would be so many.
Abraham's descendants?
Right. No, was the covenant, did Hashem tell Avram already at that point when Ishmael?
He told him even before he had children.
So he could have thought that Ishmael would be.
I understand that point. When you say the Akedah, and it says, take your son, which one? The one you love.
Right.
The only one,
The only one you love. But it shows.
No, the other way around. He said the one you love. He said, I love both of them. He said your only son. He said they're both only sons to their mother. And they said Yitzchak. In other words, he wasn't falling for it. He was ready. He loved Yitzchak till the end. Yishmael, excuse me.
Yeah, Yishmael.
So just what? Lu rak shishma yichle fanecha. So in other words, he wasn't saying I love him under all circumstances. Frankly, he's saying when he was told Yitzchak was going to be born, he said Lu Yishmael yichye lefanecha. Let it be that Yishmael will live. But the Rebbe emphasized the word before you. In other words, he can't just stop live. He should live before you, and he should go in my ways. In other words, he was like, I don't need another son to do it. I've got one. Let's just let him go the right way. Hashem answered, no, you're going to dafka have a Yitzchak, and this is going to be your true nachas, trust me. This that you're asking regarding Yishmael,
This is Midrash or Torah Shah?
this is the Rebbe's basically, Sicha. The Rebbe's analysis of the matter. He says that, this that you're asking regarding Yitzchak, Azai Yishmael Shematicha, right? That Yishmael will listen to you. He says it's true. Gam mimenu yiyeh lecha nachas. You'll also have nachas from him. But trust me, that's not enough nachas for you. You dafka need Yitzchak dikar lechazara. You dafka need in that Yitzchak will be called your seed, right? It's not enough what you're going to get the nachas from Yishmael. Avram Avinu at that time was 99 years old, of course, as is known. He was already Asaro Shanim Avrak Es HaKadosh Baruch. He was already for dozens of years, tens of years, he says here. He was already serving God. He already passed many a test. And therefore, Abraham was already a pretty sophisticated man. He certainly knew what it meant to have true nachas from his children. And this, when he asked, Lu Yishmael Yichel Lefanecha, when he asked, let it be that Yishmael would live before you. In other words, he wanted to preserve his lineage with Yishmael. Of course, he intended that Yishmael would go in the ways that Abraham would teach him. To the point that he would get the proper nachas. Even the level of nachas that Avraham Avinu understood. And nevertheless, Hashem said to him that after all this, that you know what nachas is, and you know how to raise children, and you're hoping to get... He said, no, the true nachas will only come from Yitzchak. Regarding the mother of Ishmael, Hagar, it says in the Midrash that she was extremely religious. So much so that that her conduct was fitting for the Beis HaMikdash. And that's why her name was changed from, or she was called from Hagar Keturah. Because she was like the Keturahs in the Beis HaMikdash. You know, she was mamash an unbelievably righteous woman. And she grew up in the pit of, Ervas Haaretz. And even when she went back there, she preserved herself, and she was mamash a tzadikah, big time.
She made a big change, huh? From the beginning of her life, an Egyptian.
I'm saying she grew up in Paro's house, right. In the house of the ultimate lowliness. Kamo Kain Haisabalas Mesiras Nefesh. She was also an unbelievable Moser Nefesh, as we're told by our sages that Hagar was the daughter of Paro Melech Mitzrayim, and Melech Bechas Ma'ameluchos Hadiros Bisman Hahu was one of the most powerful kingdoms in the world at that time, and nonetheless she haskima beratzona, she willingly decided to go from the great palace of the king, right, and instead of a princess and potentially a queen, she was going to go become a shifcha etzel Sarah. She was going to become mamash a maidservant. That's what she decided to do with her life. Only she could be in the house of Avraham, she would be willing to do anything. It's amazing, huh?
So when did they get that? When Avram was down
when he went down for 2 months.
And she went up.
I don't know if she came with him at that particular time or not. She may have, but she found out about him and she wanted to be in his house. It might be she came back right then. It could be. Mustama. I don't know when else they would have met. So anyway, she what's an unbelievable mysterious nefesh. She gave up everything just so she could be in the house of Abraham. And if so, it's understood that even her son would obviously be given a great chinuch. I mean, his father was Avraham Avinu. His mother was a mamash moser nefesh, gave up everything for God, basically. So what's wrong with Yishmael? What could go wrong? Kol zeh mosif biur. All this just adds to explanation to understand why Avram wanted to be settled with Yitzchak. He was good because he had a tremendous hope that he would see from him the full nachas that he needed. Ishmael. Sorry, I keep doing that. On the other hand, okay, so even though with all these facts, it's easier and easier to understand Avram's perspective. It's harder and harder then to understand Hashem's perspective. Why, despite all this, Ishmael couldn't cut it. What was the real difference between them? That is like this: the birth of Ishmael was natural, and there was nothing wrong with the guy. He was a perfect guy, a perfect upbringing. It's just that he was a normal human being. His birth was not through miracles, whereas the birth of Yitzchak was dafka through nisim, through miracles. In a normal setting, it's impossible that Avram and Sarah at that time in their lives could have a child, could have a son. And not one person in the world believed there could be such a thing. Even Avram Avinu himself did not believe there could be such a thing, right? That he laughed, he was doubted. You know the whole story. Sarah laughed, but okay. Avram also, well, it says Avram believed, but there's also an Indian of laughter. I guess his laughter wasn't, the Perush wasn't a negative one.
Well, in the earlier generations, they had children when they were in their 20s.
It's true, but the nature of things already changed, right? I mean, Avram's already only lived till 175. People used to live for 1,000. They started having children much, much earlier. They realized what was going on, I guess. Because not one person in the world believed that this could happen. And it says, let's just read it. It said, even Avram Avinu ba'atzmo lo emin shehu roi lekach. Oh, he didn't believe that he was fitting for it. I guess he didn't doubt Hashem's power. He didn't see that one coming. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu will show him that type of miracle. So this is the one major difference, that Yitzchak was born in a nace. But from this it comes out another difference in the two, Yishmael and Yitzchak, which comes to the bris milah, the one and unique only mitzvah. That through it, at that time, before Matan Torah, that was their connection to Hashem. Right? They didn't really have, of course they did all the mitzvahs before the Torah was given, but the only one that was a true mitzvah was the milah, because it was commanded to them directly from Hashem. They weren't doing it, as it were, by a hiddur. All the other mitzvahs, they were really b'nei Noach, but they wanted to be mahadir and sort of rise themselves up to a level they weren't yet commanded in. So you can't really call that a mitzvah. You know, if no one asks you to do it and you do it anyway, it's not called a mitzvah. It's just called.
Good, though.
Huh?
So what Avram did, it wasn't considered a mitzvah because it wasn't.
Avram, what? His
bris.
No, his bris was a mitzvah. It was not what you're probably thinking of is that when we do the mitzvah bris, we're not doing it because Avram was commanded. We're doing it because Moshe was commanded. But nonetheless, Avram was commanded to do a bris directly from Hashem. There's no more command than that, right? And the idea is that what's the chiddush of it is that, you know, the whole notion of, in general, the Avos did not reach the level that even we can reach on a strange way, because they didn't have mitzvahs, right? So the ability to permeate godliness into the Gashmias world was not available to them. Just despite the fact of their greatness, it wasn't that time in history. But the bris milah was the one exception, right? Because it was a preparation. If it wasn't for that Avram got a bris milah, really his children would never have 613 mitzvahs. Like, he brought down this thing called the ability to affect the flesh, mamish, and because of that, it was already set up the stage for us to be able to affect the whole Gashmias world through the mitzvahs. So this was the ultimate mitzvah that they had. It was their real true connection to Hashem. And in that, there was a big difference between Avram and Yishmael. Yishmael was circumcised, of course, at 13 years old. And when a person reaches 13 years old, he already is what's called a bar seichel. He already has a full intellect capabilities. And therefore, Naisim az mechuyav mitzvah. So at that time, when he became 13, he became obligated in the mitzvahs. Or not, the other way around. That is, why do we all, in our 13-year birth, to become obligated in the mitzvahs? Because we suddenly have a seichel. In other words, you can't really command someone who doesn't have really the full ability to choose and analyze things. So at 13 years old, Yishmael was circumcised. Right, and it's why on 13 do we get mitzvahs, because at that time you can already sort of rely on the conduct of man. He's in control of himself to some degree. He has a good enough head. So it comes out that Yishmael b'sichlo iskim liskashi makadosh baruch hu va'az nimo. So they actually pride themselves on this, the children of Yishmael, until today, that they say that the whole thing is that since he was already 13 when he got circumcised, he agreed according to his seichel, to be circumcised. And I think they actually get circumcised at
They
13.
do. They do.
You know?
Not many anymore. Very many.
In the Philippines, all the kids get 13.
But today it's a
All.
big.
They stand in line.
Today it's a big majority. Majority today get circumcised when they're babies. Not even the Muslims.
Wow, man. In the Philippines, they get all at 13. Yeah, they stand in line. It's
I'm
like
saying, but not all Muslims are B'nai Yishmael.
No, but
But
they all
not
consider
even
themselves.
not even close. I'm saying,
Right.
but the actual B'nai Yishmael, until today, they actually have a chiyuv to have a bris. The other ones, it's an iser for them to have a bris. A regular non-Jew is not allowed to have a bris. You know that?
Oh.
Not because it's a bris dafka. They're not allowed to why didn't Avram wait 99 years according to one opinion? Because he was a B'nai Noach, and it's forbidden for them to like mutilate their bodies. So Avram said he could do all the other mitzvahs that didn't require bodily mutilation, but since he was primarily B'nai Noach, he had to keep those mitzvahs good, you know what I'm saying? So he couldn't do a hitter mitzvah, which would have wound up making him transgress on his actual duties. So the same is true today with all the goyim. They're not really, that's how I understand it. I mean, what's changed? They're not supposed to circumcise themselves. It's prohibited for them.
They go to the doctor at 13.
So I'm saying, but they're still B'nai Yishmael out in the world.
Right.
Somewhere. We don't know who they are. I hope they do. Because they have a mitzvah. What's that?
You do it for health reasons now.
Okay, maybe for health reasons they can get away with it. I don't know. Is it really healthy?
There it's just a matter
Yeah,
of
it is.
custom.
It is.
It's their custom. They've been doing it.
No,
They all
it's
do it.
not just a custom. Rabbi brought out a very good point, and it is.
Totally custom.
They believe it's for health.
It is. I mean, well, I don't know
Yeah.
if they believe in
They
it,
believe
but
that's what
that's,
they believe.
you know,
Wow.
it's a different.
Because they do it for custom because they're all Christians there and they all think it's the way to do it at 13.
Anyway, in any case, Yishmael, the whole point, we're saying, what's the difference between him and Yitzchak? First of all, Yitzchak was born in a miracle. And secondly, this Indian of the bris, their big connection to Hashem. Yishmael's was based on his seichel, right? He agreed, and then he circumcised. Whereas by Yitzchak, who was only 8 days old, a little 8-day-old baby, it's not shy to ask him if you want to have a bris. And nonetheless, when he was a tiny little boy, he already got connected to Hashem, whether he likes it or not. And regarding this, you can't say no, right? And you can't erase it either, right? In other words, once you're connected, you're connected. So, since his connection, I guess what he's trying to say was not based on his intellect, so he can't be undone either. You know, if the bris if your connection was agreed to, you know, so then it could also be disagreed. In other words, when it comes to Yishmael, his bris, his connection, the bris was already based on his agreement. So therefore, if he would disagree, it could be undone. If it's not based on your agreement, what can undo it? Right? Your seichel was not the determining factor, and so therefore your seichel cannot take it away as well.
You were talking about that yesterday.
And that's what's called
Covenant.
bris olam. And that's why by Yitzchak it's called an eternal bris, because there's nothing that can undo it. Yeah, we're talking about a
Covenant.
covenant. And once you lock in, there's no way of undoing it. So he says, according to these two differences that we just mentioned between Yishmael and Yitzchak, the birth, which was supernatural, and Yitzchak, as opposed to Yishmael's regular natural birth, and the connection of Yitzchak with Hashem in a way which is above intellect, where Yishmael's connection was al pi seichel. So we can understand, based on these two distinctions, why the only true nachas that Avraham Avinu could really have was through Yitzchak, and not through Yishmael. A child that's born and grows up with the hashgacha, the oversight of the overseeing of his parents, and they guard him. Mipnei kol ruach kala, between any light wind, they protect him, and they train him and educate him, so he'll have a good, true understanding of the truth. Mitzad havanaso amisis yiskashu makadosh baruch hu. And therefore, because they train him in the truth, and he grows up in a healthy way, he's going to have a good, healthy connection with Hashem, right? Because he has a full, proper grasp of the reality of things, he's going to connect to Hashem. And this is exactly the story with Yishmael. He grew up and was raised in the house of Avraham Avinu, and he received probably the best chinuch that any child could ever possibly dream of, right? I mean, imagine that. And he had a great head, he had good parents, and he understood the truth, and he connected himself to Hashem in an ultimate way. It says he was mamash tzaddik, right? And in the end, he's gonna do tshuva, and they're all gonna be tzaddikim once again, bali tshuvas. Aval, the truth of the matter is that it's not so simple. It's not really like that. Kevan shekol hayahadus nilkachas rach meseichel. Since a person's whole Yiddishkeit, that was called Yishmael's Yiddishkeit, since his whole Yiddishkeit was taken from the mind, from his understanding, therefore, ein ladas ma yeh im yavo eizeshu shinui b'chayav. Then we're not going to know what's going to happen if a certain winds of change come into his life, right? And what's more than this, afilu lifnei sheyavo hashinoi, even if different changes, before changes will come, gami yashar ladas be'ezeh midah tiyeh etzlo yahadus b'malo amida or rak b'midah mugbeles be'atem laskama sichlo. You never know. In other words, first of all, a change could come and it could change his mind, right? He has a good chinuch, he understands the truth. Someone else can come along and teach him something else. So he could figure things out differently suddenly, since it's all based on his understanding. And what's more, even if he doesn't get his mind changed, and he's before that change, it's impossible to know in how much of the full measure his Yiddishkeit will follow the limited understanding of his seichel, right? Because seichel is in principle a limited thing, right? It has boundaries. However much you understand the truth, that's how much you're going to stand up to the tests, right?
This seems like an indictment. This says that Baal Teshuva is...
Why, Baal Teshuva is born also
yes,
a Yid. In
In
other words...
okay. But a Baal Teshuva wasn't raised in a...
No, but on the contrary, what we're saying is that even if you're raised with a perfect chinuch, if it's all about the perfect chinuch that you got and the proper training, that's not really good enough, right? Because you might change your mind. If your whole thing is based on what you got from your parents and like a healthy, proper analysis of the truth, first of all, someone could convince you otherwise. And second, before anyone convinces you of anything, since it's based on how much you get it, again, then you don't know how much a person's going to be able to live out his Judaism in full, because you don't know how deep and wide his seichel is, right? Something might come up to him, a challenge, where even if he gets the truth, he doesn't get it that much. He's not going to jump into a fire and be killed like Avram Avinu, because his seichel's not that big. Don't forget, Avram Avinu also wasn't born Jewish, but he had a massive seichel, the greatest mind in the whole world. So it seems like, even according to his understanding, he was willing to do anything. But how can you promise that to another person? Maybe their understanding is less. So even if they love Hashem and they're going to connect, it has a limit. Right? So, therefore, also by Yishmael, when Kisharak Haisa Nagia by Yerusha, right? What ticked him off? What really made him go astray, Yishmael? You remember? All of a sudden, you remember?
No.
He had a little brother, and there's a question of who's going to get Tati's money, right? They were really fighting over the inheritance.
Oh, but weren't Hagar and Ishmael sent away?
That was because of this. They found,
I thought it was because of Hagar.
He was a
not
bad
Ishmael.
influence.
No. It was 100% because of Yishmael. He was shooting arrows at Yitzchak and pretending like they were playing a game.
And
he
was
was.
at what age?
This
This was a little after 13?
It must have been, because for sure, Yitzchak was already
Still shooting arrows.
shooting arrows
They're still doing that.
at Yitzchak
Oh, but
and
the original thing
pretending
was-
it's a game.
Right, the original thing was that Hagar was like...
We don't mean to kill you,
teasing.
we're just throwing a few rocks.
But originally
Still
Hagar
doing it.
was teasing or creating problems for Sarah.
That was, right when Yishmael was born, she sort of was like, Sarah, obviously you're lo tocho kabaro, she said. Not your insides are not like your outsides. You look like this righteous woman, but I was one time shot, I got a baby. Where's your baby? You're almost 10 years. So Sarah didn't like that. She gave her the evil eye. She had a miscarriage. And then she ran away. And then, that was the first time she ran away, before Yishmael was born. And then the angels told her, come back, don't worry, I'll take care of you. And so she wound up having got pregnant a second time. It's all in Rashi, she had a miscarriage. But that was one thing. But now, that wasn't, that was a little bit, how can you dare to speak against the prophetess? But basically she was a tzadikis. But now, after the child is born, they grow up, Yishmael's trying to kill Yitzchak for the inheritance. So what do you see from here? Things change. He had the perfect chinuch. What's that? He wanted the land. Pashit, he wanted the land. Yeah, nothing's changed much, huh?
Family feud. That's what it starts.
Throwing rocks, playing games.
Still shooting arrows.
Just a few games. Anyway, what comes out from here is that when just a little, events happened, when something touched on his perception of what he was going to get, his reward. He couldn't stay in the house of Avram Avinu anymore. Couldn't maintain that chinuch. And Hashem threw him out and said, that only Yitzchak is going to be your child. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu was warning, basically, was saying that when you're going to stand here and be the man who's intended to set up the infinite generations of Am Yisrael, it's impossible to approach it in a natural approach, right? You can't just think you're going to go and be the father of all Am Yisrael because you have a good head and you had a natural birth and you're just a normal person. You're just going to really, really lock in and feel like you're connected. Say, how long is that going to last? As soon as something affects your Yerusha, your inheritance, you're going to forget all about me. Right? So Hashem was saying to Abraham, if you think this is going to last forever, you're going to need a little pinch of the miraculous here. Kol inyan v'kiyum b'nei Yisrael hu l'maylu min hateva. He was trying to tell him, only Yitzchak can be your seed, because the only way that this is going to work is if it's a completely supernatural thing from beginning to end. There's no nature in here. Is it right? It's not a normal situation. You can't just raise a kid and think he's going to live forever and uphold the Torah and be Am Yisrael if he's just a normal, natural situation. The whole thing had to be, from its inception, literally, a nes. B'nai Yisrael, from the instant of their birth, it began with miracles. So this is the answer to your question, Baal Tshuva. It doesn't have to do with who's born. We're all born from a miracle. We're all the children of Yitzchak. Right? We the whole Am Yisrael was born that we're not a normal, natural situation with a good chinuch. We didn't get here because of our smarts. We got here because the whole thing doesn't make any sense to begin with. How could a 99-year-old man have a child, a 100-year-old man have a baby? Without even taking nature into consideration at all. Jewish people cannot live and can maintain ourselves if nature is the consideration. So guess what? We don't take nature into consideration. All the poles could lead one way, and God will do whatever He wants. There's mamish nothing to do with it. Mamish, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And it's literally like that. I mean, does this make any sense? Every single person in the world is predicting, except for some makubal sitting in Yerushalayim somewhere. It's impossible. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Abraham, the only real Yiddish anachas that's possible can only be received from a child like this one. That his birth and everything that happens in his life from the time of his birth is in a godly way. Everything about him has to be in other words, so Yitzchak was the real gem over here. Even more than Avram, because Avram was not born circumcised, and Avram was not born from a miracle, So Avram was just a setup to get to Yitzchak. That when the time he's an 8-day-old baby alone, which means miyad kishneshu hizdamnus rishona, which means the very first potential, the very first opportunity, you already connect him with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And with a bris olam, an eternal connection. Even though he doesn't yet understand a thing, because it's not based on his understanding. If it was, it wouldn't last very long. You can't even ask him, do you want this eternal connection? It's completely beyond his determination. And so Yelid Kazeh, by a Yid like this, it's possible that the Yahadus, Lo Rak Al Piseh, you can have your Yiddishkeit will be based not only according to your intellect, but also from a level of Mesiras Nefesh that's beyond, that has no bounds, right? Like we said before, how much Mesiras Nefesh can you have based on your intellect? Oh, a heck of a lot. And if you're Avram Avinu and your intellect is so broad, you think it'll go on forever. But since it has some type of limitation, how much you understand, it does have a limit. When it's not based on your intellect, it could go, there's nothing that would stop you from having this Mesiras Nefesh. No test in the world, because it's not based on, does this make sense? It's based on your essential nature. So only from a kid like that can you have true Yiddish anachas that knows no bounds whatsoever in what he'll be willing to do for Hashem. We'll go into the ovens, God, whatever it takes. We don't care. We're not going to stop. This is only possible if it's completely beyond comprehension, our connection to begin with, and that's why it starts at 8 days old. Torah eino sefer historia. The Torah is not a history book, God forbid. It's an eternal Torah with eternal lessons. And the proof from this Shebekol shana maschilim od apam likros haTorah m'Bereshis. The proof is that every time we go back and we read from Bereshis over again, which means to say that the things that the Torah tells us are constant lessons, not just something that we need to remember from the past, for all times and all places, how a Jew needs to conduct himself in his house and in his chevra and his kahila, his congregation. And so it is, the story of our parsha is a lesson in our life for how, in general, in the chinuch, how to raise a Jewish child in particular. And this is also the essential point. And don't forget, it's not just talking about Jewish children. As we said in the beginning of the Sikha, this was said to a bunch of people who were giving money to yeshivas, right? So it's about, raising kids not just in the house, but in the yeshivas. He says there are those who think that the order of chinuch needs to be that you have to wait until the child grows up and understands himself a little bit, al pi seichel, how to conduct himself in the world, with the hope that since we're talking about the children of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, then they'll get it. In other words, you're talking about a yid. Let him just sort of figure it. Avraham Avinu figured it out himself. Let the yid figure it out himself. Let him raise him in the world, and he'll grab on. He'll makir boro. He'll recognize his creator. And therefore, we get the lesson from this week's parsha. If you're going to go according to mere intellect, human intellect, as much as it'll be the strongest intellect and the best you can find, that's just not the way to connect to Hashem. You won't really get there through your understanding. It's only through Mesiras Nefesh. Just surrendering yourself, surrendering your kids to Hashem in a way that doesn't make sense, just for Torah alone. I'm reading another Sikha right now, which the Rabbi in the early 50s, he was saying that there's every generation has its klippa. And he started telling a story about, what are we doing on time? He started telling a story about the grandson of the Alter Rebbe, it wasn't the Tzemach Tzedek, it was another grandson of the Alter Rebbe. And at his wedding, he came in with this beautiful fur coat, and it's like half leather and half fur. I don't know, it was a whole thing. And the Alter Rebbe came up to me and says, listen, if you right now tear that thing up into pieces and get rid of it, I promise you a place in my mechitza in Gan Eden. That is a very, very good place. Right? I mean, what kind of a deal is that? Like, who wouldn't tear the thing up? So he did tear it up, obviously. I mean, that guy is sitting in Gan Eden right now with Alter Rebbe. It's pretty amazing. But the question was, whatever, and he asked the Alter Rebbe, like, is it okay if I tear it up and, like, I don't really feel the full Mesiras Nefesh, like, that you want me to? Whatever, there's all kinds of details and lessons we can learn from that story. But the Rebbe's like, what kind of a deal is this? I mean, why do you offer him, mamish, the ultimate gift for that? It's not such a... So he said, because in that time, in Russia, it came in this new klippa of the internet. No, not the internet. Of dressing in the fine clothes of the goyim. It was all of a sudden all the Jews, had to have the fanciest fur, and like they were getting into it. And his own son-in-law, his own grandson, came to the wedding like this, and he saw this klippa like mamish in his own household, and he realized the only way to get to this klippa is to right away in the beginning of it, just like break it. You have to break these klippas like right in their face, because he knew that if his grandson would do this, it would like reverberate into the whole Am Yisrael, and it wouldn't let that klippa in. So the Rebbe said, he's telling this story because he's saying, I hate to tell you, but I'm doing the same thing right now in this Fabrengen. And what was the klippa? He said the klippa it's still the klippa, unfortunately, but in our generation, in that time in America, was the union of tachlis. He says before a kid even is 5 years old, you're already figuring out what he's going to be for a living, right? Yeah, it's true, right? And you're going to send him to schools and prepare his secular education for him, so that he's going to wind up being a doctor. By the time he's 6 years old, you're already working on this. And it's mamish like that, right? You have to go to the best prep schools, and you got to go to the best colleges. And before even the guy, so you're going to spend all this time, but you don't even know if he's going to wind up doing that with his life. So you're going to waste all this time preparing him for something. I heard Rabbi Jacobson said, there's a debate obviously going on in America. When's the fetus considered viable, in the womb? So he said, if you ask a Jewish mother, it's like after he graduates medical school. Because before that, he's not worth anything. You might as well just kill him. Right? This is a klippa, big time klippa. He's a funny man, by the way. Every 5 seconds, this guy is pouring out jokes, the best jokes you ever heard. It's crazy. Anyway, so the idea is that the Rebbe, in a similar way, Mamash broke this klippa. How did he do it? And he got a lot of slack. You should see the letters. There's many, many letters to this effect. The Rebbe's explaining himself to parents who are saying, like, you want my kid to just sit and be like a batlan and learn no math, no social studies, doesn't know the 50 states, you know. My shliach, when the Rebbe told him he was going to Portland, Oregon, he didn't know where it was on the map. He's like, okay, you know, he's looked up, got the map out.
Washington.
But at this point, he took over the state of Portland, you know. I mean, it's... Anyway, the point is, the Rebbe was saying that we have to get this clip out of our minds that you have to be somebody and prepare yourself to do something. He's like, no, you just have to push it, sit and learn Torah. And I'm sure even the people sitting around this table are like shocked by that, even now, right? Because it's such ingrained in us, this idea that you have to be somebody and prepare yourself to be somebody. It's irresponsible otherwise. He's saying, just like it's irresponsible not to wear the fanciest fur jacket, but everybody else is doing it. It's a klippa. It's not a Yiddish way. And that's what the Rebbe is saying here. In short, he's saying that when it comes to raising kids, you can't raise them al pi seichel. You can't raise them, and the whole thrust of their education is doing things what's going to make sense and what's normal. No, you have to raise them with what doesn't make sense. Because raising them in a way that makes sense, you think, well, he's going to be a doctor, he's going to go be Bibi Netanyahu, he's going to lead, he's going to be the president. And therefore the Jewish people will be safe. You know, you're going to convince yourself that that's the way for Jewish preservation. That you have to use your mind. It doesn't have anything to do with your mind. If it did, Yishmael could have been the father of the Jewish people. It has to do with something which makes no sense at all. And the whole thing has to be ridiculous, miracle. You have to base him on a miracle. I'm going to send you to yeshiva, and you're not going to have you're not going to speak English, and you're not going to know where your final place where you're going to work is. You don't even know the name of it. You don't know where it is on the map, and you're going to succeed because the whole thing is going to be a miracle. That's a crazy thing, but that's what he's saying. The inception of Am Yisrael, that's what it is. It won't work any other way.
It's all about developing trust, right? It's a phone. Right?
Again, yeah, I suppose that you can say that it is. I have no problem with that, but it's not developing trust. It can also be done by seichel, right? Mm-hmm. But this is something that...
Well, it's by action, by putting yourself in a position of just going along with...
But think about it. Developing trust was certainly given to Yishmael after 13 years old. He was developed trust. But giving an 8-year-old, is it really developing his trust? He doesn't even know what you're talking about. You're putting him into a situation where the parents have to have the trust more than the kid.
Right.
You're just making his life one of a living trust because it doesn't make sense to raise a kid like that. That's what he's saying. This is how we have to raise our kids. That's how we have to raise our bacharim as well. There's no tachlis over here. You're not going anywhere. You're just doing the ridiculous, the impossible. You're going to sit here and learn about laws that never happen, never will happen, and this is our strength. Okay, another lesson that we learn. Ein lachshov, you shouldn't think that a child needs to be... What's that? Yeah. Yeah, you shouldn't think that when it comes to starting off with the educational process, that you should start off light. Give the kid a little Yiddishkeit. And as he gets older, you give him a little bit more. He says, this would be proper if we were talking about something that had to do with calculations. Yeah, that totally makes sense. You don't start with the massive, you start with the small and you build up. But when it comes to Bnei Yisrael, which are completely higher than any natural calculations, we have a clear lesson from the Torah here. And when it comes to a Jewish kid, the Seder is, the way the process is, that when he's only 8 days old, you have to already give him the full measure of Yiddishkeit, hold nothing back. You already have to connect him with his eternal connection. Right? That's a pretty serious move. I mean, let's say, at least maybe do Nagelwasser before that. You're going to take it right off 8 days. I mean, he hasn't even started with the basics yet. Right? So he says because you're connecting him not just for a year or 10 years or 20 years. You're connecting him forever from day one. In a bris olam, immediately. What's that?
On day 8.
Day 8. Again, he said, why 8? Because it's the first available opportunity. Why is the first available opportunity?
Well, science of coagulation of the blood. It's
Yeah,
strong
but
on 8th day.
That's already a calculation.
That's second day.
Shabbos.
Right, you have to have one Shabbos before you can have a bris. Right, that's the official reason why it's on the 8th day.
It's science.
What's that?
It's the reason why science makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, Hashem created the world to make it make sense. My kavana shagam yaladim yesh l'ses yahadus mira chazaka b'yoser. What's the intention? What do we mean practically? We say you should give a yid the full measure of Yiddishkeit. That we need to tell and to explain to the youth, even from the time that they're very young, that Am Yisrael bechlal, and therefore every Jew in particular, is not connected with any natural calculations. That there's no calculations on your life. There's no reason or rhyme to what levels you can achieve or what you can. I mean, that's already something that everybody can teach their kids. But you're telling them in a mamash a very simple way that you can't. Your success doesn't depend on external calculations. It depends on your connection to Hashem. That's basically what he means here, I think.
In the commentary of the parsha yesterday, Rabbi writes about that when Hashem took him outside to look at the stars,
right,
on the material calculation, astrology would work, but you're beyond that.
Exactly.
You're looking down at it.
Exactly. And that was what? That was the blessing for him to have children, right? So tzrichim, we have to say to the youth,
Here we are.
yeah, mamish, still to this day telling the story. We have to say to the youth that he has to put all of his calculations aside. Someone who comes out from a nation like this, that the beginning of it was built in completely irrational and not according to the rules of nature. Someone that comes from the most ancient of people, who has an ancient Torah, and already a multitude of years and tests and difficult tests have come upon us, and our only way we got through them is because of miraculous, not because of our intelligence, not because of our political connections, not because of our might, none of that. It's just absolute miraculous. And you look at the kid and this is what you have to tell him, to make him realize that you're not going to get anywhere through your brains or through your might or through your connections, right? Through your education, through your degrees. You can give him degrees, but you have to make sure he knows that this is not what's going to get him to the next level. That's not what makes an infinite nation go on forever. It just doesn't work like that. Adam Kazeh, a person like this, is not connected with any calculations, and he has nothing what to calculate. And when we conduct misnagim imo b'derech zu, when you raise him in such a way, and even when he's a young child, that he knows that he's above all calculations, connected with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in an infinite, eternal way, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu promises, B'yitzchak yikarech lechazara. Right? In other words, then Hashem, the promise to Avraham finally comes that your true Yiddish anachis, your real Yiddishkeit is only going to come from Yitzchak. And what he's saying is to parents and to teachers, that if you really want to feel like you're going to have, and to even spouses, in other words, this is how you have to relate to every single other Jew that you meet. If you want that relationship to bear fruit and last and go somewhere and be something you're going to be proud of for eternity, it can't be based on calculation. It's be based on mamish connecting to the Eibishter, even though it doesn't make any sense, and that the whole thing is Torah and the world doesn't even exist, and the whole rules of science and nature and medicine, they're just completely immaterial, because what matters is that putting on tefillin with the yid and giving another dollar to tzedakah. This is the only thing that makes the world go. This is the only way you're going to have nachas from your kid, right? Is if they have that type of perspective of reality. It's very deep. If you don't give, and I'm telling you, I see, friends, and you could see this with kids. If a kid doesn't feel that Yiddishkeit is the only thing in the world, you don't have the full nachas from him. He's like dabbling into the world, even though he'll become a doctor. There's something missing, that like, where's his true, center? And this refers to both Ruchnius and Gashmius, the real Yiddish Nachas. That's how you're also going to get the Gashmius Dika Nachas from him. Because he'll have true success, because he'll be able to go through anything and wind up on top, because there's no calculations. So it is when it comes to yeshivas. Now there are those that want to claim the yeshivas, it's a good thing. But only for a few people, only for individuals, right? Special kids get to go to yeshiva, right? I had a cousin, he was visiting me here. He's an 81-year-old guy. And I was getting to him a little bit with Yiddishkeit, but it's 81 years, not keeping the Torah is a little hard to break through. And, he says, at the end, he was like kind of getting excited. He started thinking, like, can I put this in my life? And he was like, you know what, but thank God there's people like you keeping the Torah, for all of us. That's what people think, it's like, yeshiva, sure, we need it. We need rabbis. Let them learn how to make weddings, but we'll run the government and we'll tell the army to throw the Jews out of their houses. This is the news today. They'll say, when it comes to Yiddishkeit, yeah, we'll put it in the yeshiva. It's good for a few. It's good for a little small handful of our people. Right? And when will we have yeshivas? By the way, only when, of course, all of our other interests are in place. We don't have an army. We're not going to start yeshivas. When there's plenty of money and there's plenty to go around, okay, we'll throw a little bit out of yeshiva. It wouldn't hurt us. Then we can run a yeshiva.
The first thing in Egypt.
Was it something I said?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
The first thing in Egypt, they made yeshivas, right?
Don't want to. Before Yaakov arrived, yeah.
I'm just joking, sorry. But when there's no money, right, then, and it's going down from year to year, what do we need yeshivas for, right? What do we have to throw our money into this place? They don't realize the utility of it, because according to calculation, you don't need such a thing, right? It doesn't help you with your army, it doesn't help you with your financial economy, it doesn't help you get anywhere in the world. It's mamish like a bunch of batlanim sitting around talking about things that doesn't have anything to do with anything. So if you're going to look about calculation, there's no budget for that. If you're calculating according to the secular mind, right? And certainly not yeshiva. I mean, maybe if you want to say Talmud Torah, okay, we have to put the kids somewhere. And chaval, we're going to make schools anyway. We might as well put rabbis as their teachers instead of whoever else. But Ari said advanced education. You have to pay for these kids to eat and sleep and have all the mamish. Come on, let them make a job. There's no room for that, right? How can you say yeshivas is such a significant thing? It's mamish. It's a threat against our livelihood over here. So he says, "Gam im yesh kvar yeshivas." And even if you want to say, okay, there's already yeshivas, fine, let there be yeshivas. But he'll go on to claim, "Mi yom shekol talmidim chayav lilmod Gemara dafka." Why does everyone have to learn Gemara? V'im lo dai beGemara lo mdidim mehem gam Chasidus, and not only learning Gemara, you're learning Chasidus. It has nothing to do with anything b'chlal. And if that's not enough, mishtav l'shehem yilmedu Chasidus gam macherim. You're pushing these kids out that their whole tafkid in life should be to go learn Chasidus with other people, as you're turning these people into Martians. He says that the order needs to be, so they claim, that devarim apshutim yilmedu gam makatan. Aval devarim agdolim is that you teach the simple things to the kids, but the big things like Chasidus and the like, you should wait until they grow up, and only then you should teach them the big things, the big ideas. The Gemara, puts them into the full, like you said before, right away from the beginning. You already give the kid the full gamut of Yiddishkeit. 8 days old, you're already chopping him up there. He says the same thing is true when it comes to yeshivas. Don't think you should start with the light stuff, and then later when he gets older, pile on the real stuff. We have the lesson from the Torah that as soon as the child is born, immediately you connect him in the fullest measure possible with Hashem, in such a way that that him nor his parents could go back on, and it's a done deal. Mm-hmm. He's circumcised, and only in such a way does the Torah promise that this will be a rich kid, right? Not just in this olam hazeh, not just in olam haba and in ruchnias, but also b'pashtus in olam hazeh and begashmis. He's saying this is the only way to ensure the survival of a yid, and the survival of a yid is not in olam haba; it's olam hazeh. This is how the success of the Jewish people come. And look, you see it, Mamash and Eretz Yisrael. We're going to sit here arguing whether or not we should listen to the goy inside of us and give our land away. We wind up putting ourselves in physical danger. Whereas we'll do the impossible, the ridiculous, and just claim our rights to the land because it doesn't make sense according to the world, because it's Torah. We're going to live bagashmias and well and healthy, and it's the physical survival of a yid, not just the spiritual survival. It's an amazing thing. We exist supernaturally. If we try to exist naturally, we won't even exist bagashmias anymore. And this is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised to Abraham regarding Yitzchak, that he's going to give him the Eretz Torah, Bagashmis K'Pashut. He's going to give him the good land, the physical good land. All right, we'll hold here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great.
Gives
How do
them.
we clean up? How do we clean up? I know like with paper towels, like is that something to be?
Yeah. Good question. We got. I mean, most of it just is cups, right?
No, they're in the process of throwing out